Hi, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to share how the two codependent types, both the disempowered and the falsely empowered codependent, express the 5 core symptoms of codependence. Now, the 5 core symptoms of codependence are a lack of self-love, a lack of boundaries or inability to set boundaries. They're out of touch with reality. They lack in the ability to self-care, and they lack maturity and moderation. And as I go through all of these, how both the disempowered and the falsely empowered express those 5 in their lives, so you can be able to kind of get an idea of how this is showing up in your life. I'm going to also express how they show up in mine, because I'm both. I'm just flat out crazy. I've been through a lot in my life, and so I have a lot of, as I like to call them, perfect imperfections. And it's my belief, at least what works best for me, is for me to show how I'm perfectly imperfect as I teach about all of this stuff. It's just the model I was going to say I was raised on. In a way, that's true, because, gosh, yeah, it was over 20 years ago. I walked into my counselor's office and I was going through a divorce with a physically and verbally abusive spouse. I mean, I've talked about, it was just awful. And I was telling him a little bit about it, and I'd pursued personal development and lots of stuff, and so I knew a little bit, not like I do now, but I knew enough to know there was something imperfect about me. And as I sat there, and explained what happened, and I didn't know exactly, how all this worked or what my struggles were, but I turned to him and I said, Mike, I don't know how to be a man. And that was the truth. I didn't know how to be a man, because if you're in a relationship like that and you're being treated that way, that's about us too, because we're condoning it by staying. That says a lot about us, and it doesn't make us bad. It was just the best I could do. And luckily for me, he said, Kenny, when I was in your shoes, I went and became an expert. That phrase just stuck, and that's what I've done for the last 20 years. I've gone and become an expert. And that's what I was raised on. Really, Mike taught me how to be a man. And these processes I'm going to share with you, that's a big piece of it. All of us are left in childhood. I don't care who you are, how successful you are left in childhood. It happens to all of us because of the worst day cycle, because of the societal beliefs and the things we teach and don't teach. We all are codependent. We all get left in childhood, and we all get to decide if we want to grow out of that. I chose to do it, and I'm very thankful that I did. I encourage you to choose your reality, and if you want to stay stuck, well, I call it staying stuck. You may call it home. I encourage you to do what's best for you. For those of you who want to grow out of that, and as I like to say, become the greatest version of yourself, then let's get started. This video is for you. So again, there are 2 types of codependence. Sadly, only one other person that I'm aware of in this industry talks about the 2 types, and that's Pia Mellody. And that's who I was raised on, was Pia Mellody. And man, if you don't know about the falsely empowered codependent, you are robbing yourself of tremendous growth, and you're only going to mature so far into adulthood. Because what we think of as mature adults are actually the falsely empowered codependent. And because we have this slanted view, even CODA, Codependents Anonymous, which I love, everyone's only talking about the typical disempowered, which is what we all think of. They get run over, treated poorly, and all that. There is that. But the so-called successful, they're just as codependent, and we're going to talk about the 2 of them. So remember, these are all born, and part of what the worst day cycle is born out of these dynamics. If you are not familiar with the worst day cycle, if that sounds new to you, I encourage you to pick up a copy of my book. This is something I discovered, that this is a human dynamic. This isn't just certain people. All of us are stuck in this worst day cycle. It's how we all live our lives. It's a self-destructive process that unless we go back and do this healing work and gain emotional mastery and recover from our childhood injuries and traumas, we will repeat this in our hobbies, careers, friendships, relationships, every area of our life. All we're ever doing is reliving that trauma and those injuries until we gain emotional mastery and heal them. So I encourage you to pick up that so you can learn about the worst day cycle. I also have a playlist on my YouTube channel. Please go to it, watch those videos. That if you don't want to spend money, that'll give you an outline of the basic process so you can start getting familiar with how you're stuck in your own worst day cycle and the codependence. They're intermingled together. All right. Now, these adaptations, these two types of codependence are born out of childhood. If you saw my last video about the wounded inner child, I talked about how the wounded child gets created and the adapted wounded child gets created. If you have not seen that video, you're going to want to go back and watch it. It's called The Wounded Inner Child. That will really help you deepen your knowledge of how all of this works. Real quick recap, the wounded child is created in the first 5 years of life. We've all been wounded in this area. That creates the disempowered codependent. Again, to learn more about that, go back and watch that video. But that's where the disempowered codependent, primarily that's where the disempowered, it can happen from 6 to 17, the 6 to 17-year-old, that's where the falsely empowered codependent gets created. The disempowered can happen there also. All right, we can still have disempowering events that create a disempowered codependent, but what is true for all of us is that the wounded child will morph into the adapted wounded child. And this is where the falsely empowered codependent, this is where we learn, okay, now that I have enough because we've matured enough in that age range to get a sense of here's how our perfectly imperfect dysfunctional family works. And this is who I'm going to have to develop this false persona. This is all worst day cycle stuff. I have to become something I'm not so that I can survive the family system. And so now we're stuck in either the wounded child, the adapted wounded child, and either primarily the disempowered codependent or the falsely empowered codependent, or a mixture of both. All right. Again, for more information on all of this, go back and watch two videos in a playlist. The first one is The Wounded Inner Child. Another video on my codependence playlist is called The Two Codependent Personalities. That will help you learn more about this as well. And then to discover more about the worst day cycle, go to my worst day cycle playlist. There are 5 videos. They're all titled Reclaim Your Authentic Self by Becoming Trauma Informed, or pick up a copy of my book, Your Journey to Success. All right, so now let's get into the 5 core symptoms. Remember, they are lack of self-love, lack of boundaries, we're out of touch with reality, a lack of self-care, and lack of maturity and moderation. All right, so I'm going to go through all 5 of those in the disempowered, and then I'm going to go through the falsely empowered. All right, so the disempowered, when it comes to a lack of or low self-love, what that looks like is their self-worth is determined by other people's thoughts, feelings, or actions. They can't do it within themselves. Remember, this is the disempowered, your typical codependent that most people think of. They often feel a sense of self-detest, like they detest themselves. They feel so inadequate, imperfect. They tend to be one down. In other words, in a relationship, they'll take the bottom position, or they will belittle themselves. In that way, you see me do that all the time. You'll catch me, dropping into complete lack of self-love. And I just go, boom, and denigrate myself. They will feel worthless and empty. I don't really feel worthless anymore. At times, I still feel empty. They will give themselves away and be people pleasers. That was me before I really got into this journey with Mike. That was me. I couldn't say no to anyone or anything. I had no voice. That's the typical disempowered with low self-esteem or an inability to love themselves. They develop other-esteem. This is, again, will resonate with you for those that are the typical codependent. They believe their value comes from taking care of others. Now, they do this to hide a deep sense of shame. And the message, the injury that they suffered in childhood was that they have no worth unless they take care of others. That was my dynamic with my father. I just have pictures of rubbing his feet when he'd be, it'd be Friday nights and he'd be watching TV, and I'd grab the lotion, I'd rub his feet, and just trying to get him to look at me with worth. And he'd just be wrapped up in what he was doing. Like, I'd just give myself away. Just notice me, Dad, so I would feel a sense of worth. And this is where, I use this, Bradshaw uses this term, sadistically nice. No one likes to hear that term. I know that hurts. And that's because of the shame you went through. It's like, oh, I can't admit that about me, that my niceness and my people pleasing, because the disempowered codependent we'll talk about this, is out of touch with reality. They're not reality, that all of this is a manipulation. It's all based on shame, low self-esteem. It's not truly nice. They're filled with sadness and anger at how they were shamed and belittled and ignored and abandoned and neglected. And so that they're just like me, rubbing my father's feet, trying so hard to be nice, but filled with rage. And so that's why the niceness has a sadistic quality to it, because it always has. It always comes at a cost. People, especially when it's here, they're filled with resentment. They keep score. They throw it in other people's faces. That's the sadistic nature of it. Is they need to be recognized. They need people to, acknowledge their niceness. Well, that's a manipulation. If we're truly nice, we're doing it out of the goodness of our heart. We don't care if they respond. We don't need their response. See, we are interdependent. We are not codependent on their reaction. How do the disempowered lack boundaries? What does that look like? Well, the disempowered codependent is too dependent. They unrealistically expect care at all times. These are the ones, you should have my back, and I gave to you, you owe me. Like I see people when they, watch these videos, they'll really fight back. No, it's just common courtesy, I should get recognized. Well, that's their lack of boundaries, all right? And that's a part of how they're out of touch with reality. They can't say no. They give themselves and their power away to others in the hopes that somebody will notice them. Like it's an exchange, but it's manipulative. I'll give it, just like me rubbing my father's feet. I was giving myself away. I was giving my power away. Please, Dad, notice me. And we end up that's part of the worst day cycle. We'll do it as an adult in our relationships, careers, everything. Had a client in the office this week, just realized she's in mortgages because all she does, what do mortgage people do? They take care of real estate agents. They do everything for them. That was her whole childhood. She gave herself away, didn't know how to say no. She's been doing it her whole life. They make others responsible for their well-being, or try to be responsible for and rescue others. That's the manipulative power grab. If I can be superhuman and take care of everybody, then I'll have worth. That's how they're out of it. They don't realize they're lying to themselves, and that's an unconscious manipulative dynamic they've put in place. Not because they're bad. They're just trying to survive the injuries and trauma from childhood. This is the worst day cycle. They're just adapted. I've got to be disempowered to fit into this family system. I have no other shot. Okay? They see boundaries as mean, selfish, unkind, and that they are bad if they set them. The disempowered, that's out of reality. Now, to recognize here, in codependence, both the disempowered and falsely empowered are out of touch with reality, all right? They don't realize they're dysfunctional. The disempowered is much more aware of it. The falsely empowered hardly ever, all right? The way the disempowered can't see it is they're unconscious to the truth that they are deceiving themselves about who they are. They also can't contain their truth, and they overshare it. They are boundaryless. They puke their thoughts, feelings. You've seen people just share their whole life story within 2 seconds of meeting somebody. That's being boundaryless. They don't make direct requests. And that they're passive aggressive, and so they don't realize that's a manipulation to control somebody. They expect others to read their mind, and they play the martyr. You should just know what I want. We've been together long enough. They're out of touch with the reality that they're codependent and that they're demanding somebody take care of them. It's not the other person's job, but they've given themselves away so much. Now you better know, and if you don't, and then they can't see how manipulative that is and how out of touch that they're in self-deception of how they're controlling everyone from this disempowered victim position. They see it as righteous, and they're out of reality with that. Now, not all, but I'm talking about the part where they're out of reality, all right? They will allow others to dictate how they think, act, believe, or they'll tell others how to think, act, and believe. And usually, when they allow others, these are the people who've been with narcissists, and then they play the victim card and blame the narcissist for everything, as though they didn't go along with any of it, they didn't pick them. Like, it is never about them. They're completely out of touch with reality as to how they played a part. They won't take responsibility that they allowed this person in their life, and they're responsible for that. They're not to blame. And, not but, because it's true, they're not to blame. We don't teach about this, so I don't blame. And they are responsible to learn about it and heal it. Just like I did, went into my counselor and said, look, I know something's wrong with me. It's not all about her. It's about me too. We have to take responsibility for that. When the disempowered, out of touch with reality won't do that, okay? They will expect care at all times, even when they say, oh no, I don't need it. They need it and they want it. And inside they're silently resenting if you don't chase them down and give it to them anyway. They're willing to get help. This is the beauty of the disempowered. They're willing to get help. Even though they're out of reality, that their caretaking and their niceness is manipulative, that it's covert, and in its attempt to control others, and it's not actually nice. They are out of reality of that truth. They were so neglected and abandoned in childhood that they are desperate, and this was me. I was so uncared for that I was desperate to get any help. I tried Mike would suggest something, I'd do it. I didn't care. I was not resistant, and I'm still not resistant. People call me out on my BS nonstop, followers, whatever, and if my reality lines up, I'm like, yep, you're right, I blew it on that one. That's the beauty of being the disempowered codependent. Is the abandonment was so severe that you're willing to do anything not to be abandoned again. And that means you're willing to do the recovery work. All right? Now, the lack of self-care, the disempowered is very ineffective at meeting their needs and wants. They tend to be too needy. They require constant attention, remember? Now, they won't see it that way. They won't see their neediness as too much, but it is too much. What they require, but they don't realize it's their job to meet it, but that's because of the abandonment. That's why they're so needy. They'll feel guilt and shame or bad if they care for themselves. Like there's a tremendous, I can't do that. It's not nice. I'm selfish. These will be the hyper spiritual ones. They'll throw up God. Don't misunderstand me and say I'm disparaging religion, or that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a subset of people who use religion and God inappropriately under the guise of the Bible says I have to do this. Well, that's how they're out of touch with reality, that they're not supposed to take care of. Look, Jesus went in the temple and destroyed everything. He said, hey, I'm not putting up with this. I have some needs and wants here. All right? Well, you get to do that too. But no, you're out of touch with reality. You're needless and wantless. Oh, I can't do it. I'm so selfish and rude. Well, I guess, do you see you're placing yourself above God when you do that? Okay? The disempowered will avoid self-care by taking care of others first. And this is the covert manipulative dynamic. This is the sadistically nice. They don't realize they're manipulating from this victim position, but they are. They will also get sick and hurt a lot. This is the only way they know how to get others to care for them, because they don't know how to make the request directly. Or they'll have terrible relationships. They post it all over Facebook, but they never do anything about it. Because, do you see, they're desperate for care and attention, but they've only learned how to do it manipulatively. That was me. I didn't want to massage my dad's feet. It was a manipulation. I was trying to get something from my dad. That's what I learned in my childhood, was how to be nice, to manipulate, to try and get something. So I got sick and hurt. You read about my book. I used to get sick and hurt my whole childhood. I was in and out of hospitals just because it would keep my mom sober. If I was sick or hurt, my mom wouldn't drink. I manipulated the whole family. All of us kids were, we were all really sick. All of us. Everyone was fighting to get seen and heard and get attention, to deal with the abandonment and neglect. But I made damn sure I was the sickest and the most hurt. I ran that house. I didn't see it then, but I see now how covertly manipulative I was as a survival mechanism. Because of the worst day cycle, it was all I could do. I'm not a bad person. I'm surviving. But now it's my job to take ownership and responsibility of my perfect imperfections and how I used everyone and everything, because no one taught me anything different. And that's why I do this. You're doing this because no one ever showed you a different way. You're not to blame for that. And so now, for the first time in your life, you get a choice. You can decide to tackle all this, or you can stay where you are. It's your reality. Do what works best for you. But I know this. You'll never find what you want unless you do this work. And you'll get to it when it's right time for you. All right? How about immature and inability? The disempowered are chaotic, immature, out of control. They procrastinate. They refuse to delay gratification, and they will rebel. They can at times be obstinate and stubborn and act impulsively without thinking. Addiction is quite common. They can't say no to themselves or others. Well, I've had about every addiction you can imagine. That's me. Let's switch over to the falsely empowered and their low self-esteem, self-love. They see themselves on the polar opposite. They see themselves as better than others. Well, my God, have you seen how I talk down about everyone? Oh, I'm the best at everything. No one knows what I know. And if you don't follow what I teach and talk about, you just aren't my God, you can see how falsely empowered I am. I get on my hobby horse about how great I am. And how, all this stuff. I don't even need to say it. You've seen it. In those moments, just go, oh, poor Kenny. He's feeling about this big right now. Must have been thinking about his dad, or who knows. Something came up. I'm just feeling insecure, and that's okay. All right? They can also be arrogant and grandiose, caught in the delusion of perfectionism. I don't do that, but arrogant, grandiose, I can do all that. The delusion that they are flawlessly good, I don't struggle with that one, but many do. They develop other-esteem, believing that their value comes from the admiration or the adulation from others, which is primarily derived through their achievements. That was me playing sports. I don't worry about that stuff anymore. But this is why the falsely empowered, the so-called most successful, look, that documentary by Carl Icahn, The Billionaire, watch it. And he talks about how awful he was treated in childhood. And he hates what he's doing. He gets no satisfaction from it. He's just looking for this. He's so filled with shame and low self-esteem. He's like, well, if I can get enough money, if I can conquer this, maybe I'll feel better. But it's not working. He says it right there, all of them do. When you learn about this stuff, it's so obvious. The most successful are just as broken, just as perfectly imperfect. They've just used their self-loathing, low self-esteem, self-hatred, and shame in the opposite direction. Instead of collapsing, they went to be superheroes. They over-impressed. Achievement and the presentation of being confident is a smokescreen to hide their deep shame and lack of inherent worth. They're just like everybody else. And this is part of where people confuse the narcissist with the falsely empowered codependent. You're going to see, if you choose to invest in learning about this information, you're going to see what you've been calling a narcissist is really a falsely empowered codependent. How do they lack boundaries? Well, they're different. They're anti-dependent. They're invulnerable. They never ask for help or admit that they need help. The falsely empowered say no a lot, but they use it as power. They use it to seek retribution. It's to pay you back. Because this is the falsely empowered, it's all about power, to hide how disempowered they actually feel. It's an adaptation to cover over tremendous low self-esteem and shame, but it looks the opposite. It hides behind shirts and suits and pocket squares. Their conscious and unconscious goal is power and control to keep themselves safe. I used to do this in my intimate life. I pursued a dynamic intimately, which was all about power and control because I felt so powerless. They can be judgmental and critical. Okay, now we're really getting into Kenny. They can be judgmental and critical, defensive, dismissive, and withhold. Well, I don't withhold information. I get boundaryless and share too much info. Well, I don't know if it's too much information. The falsely empowered are walled in, walled off, and they avoid intimacy. And they do that by not letting themselves be known. It's always think of those men or women you've been with that use this. That's the falsely empowered. But we in our society, ooh, they're strong, they're sexy, they've got it together, they're measured and mature. It's the exact opposite. They're hiding severe immaturity. They're not moderate and mature. That's what they're missing, okay? The falsely empowered, how are they out of touch with reality? They're unconscious and deceiving themselves about the truth of who they are, just like the disempowered. They don't know or don't share the truth about themselves. They don't know the truth about themselves. They don't share the truth about themselves, yet they think of all people, they know themselves. Like they'll fight me to tooth and nail about their reality and how they've got it all together. And what do you mean my childhood is a problem? Oh no, like they think they've got it all figured out. And they're completely out of reality that they don't have it figured out. They're like, this is why people will confuse them with narcissists, because they're so pig-headed. It's not that they're pig-headed, it's that they're covering intense shame, all right? They use their success to deceive themselves that they are okay. They guard against letting others know them, but even worse, they defend against knowing themselves. Their deep shame core gets covered over with false arrogance and a false belief in their competency and the pursuit of their achievement. They leave out details. They avoid discussion or argument. They stay busy to avoid reality and connection. The walled in, better than anti-dependent will resist recovery. They will rarely get professional help, and they don't think they need it. They're the toughest to treat, and they're most often mischaracterized as a narcissist. Most people on this planet that are successful and that you think are a narcissist are actually a falsely empowered codependent that's desperately out of touch with reality and hiding a deep, deep low self-esteem and a deep shame core. How do they lack self-care? They're needless and wantless. They won't ask for help because they don't believe they need help because they're so falsely empowered. They don't want to appear weak, so they avoid interdependence. They're disinterested, forgetful, late. That's all about power. Because they too were their abandonment was different. They were suffocated. They were made to grow up too early. So late is all about power. I can't invest. I'm going to own you. I'm going to make you wait on me. They're dismissive or even become angry at having to care for others. That happens to me. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes, all the comments and things. Now, please don't take on this. This is my pain. Don't own this. Put up your boundaries. Protect yourself. But sometimes the comments and private messages I get, I freak out. I go into rage and lose it. Because I'm like, haven't I done enough? Now that none of that's true. I'm the one posting the videos. It's not your fault. I'm out of touch with reality. I'm playing the victim. I'm lacking self-care, but I'm blaming you because you're commenting on a video I posted. Like, how dare you? Like, who's to blame here? There's no blame, but who's responsible? Me. And so I shut down, and just like this is my falsely empowered side. I get angry at having to respond to you. Well, I don't even have to respond to you. I get to choose. But see, that's the codependent draw. All right? Both the falsely empowered and disempowered get sick and hurt to control others. As I said, I used to do that. I don't do that now. How do they lack maturity and boundaries? Well, they are overly mature. They are rigid, perfectionistic, obsessive, stubborn, controlling. They are doers. They can't be. They can't sit still. That's the lack of moderation. Addictions are common, and the only way they know how to be vulnerable really is through health issues. They get sick and hurt a lot, and they use that to control others. But they can do it at a distance. It's kind of like I can ring the bell. I'm sick, take care of me, but I'm too sick to talk. No, just bring me what I need. And oh, yeah. But I can get in, it's the only way they can accept care is they blow up their life in some way. So this is the successful person who all of a sudden blows everything up, you know? So how do you heal from all of this? Well, again, 3 things. Pick up my book, Your Journey to Success, learn about the worst day cycle. Pick up Pia Mellody's book, Facing Codependence. I would also highly encourage you to go to my masterclass website, www.thegreatnessyou.com. I've done 3 really deep codependence recovery courses, masterclasses that guide you through the process of healing to bring you into, to raise your self-esteem, to teach you how to have boundaries, to bring you into reality of how this is shaping your life, and show you how to care for yourself and attain maturity and moderation in your life. The 3 masterclasses I suggest you take are titled, the first one is How to Break Free from Toxic Relationships. This is level 1 of codependence. Level 2 is How to Set and Negotiate Healthy Boundaries. Level 3 is How to Create Lasting Love and Connection. Those 3 will, whichever side of the dynamic you're on. Now, if you financially don't have the money to pay for those, what I've done to help those in that position is I've created an Audible only. Now, you don't get the journey books, which you really need to work through this, but at least you can get the content. I can't remember what the Audible is. Maybe it's $30. You know, it's very inexpensive, but at least you get the material to start learning about. Now, if you decide you can at some point buy the videos and journey books, pay the full price for all of that. But at least it gets you, if you're just, look, some people, because of their codependence and things, they're just financially, that's the best they can do right now. Well, that's why I did it. I do my best to offer things for, free to those who can afford it. So I can make a living, but you can also get the recovery that I believe we all deserve. Okay? So those are your options. If you think this will help somebody, please share it. Leave me your comments, and as always, enjoy the journey.